Okay, well, joining us now on the Marlins Hot Stove Show is another, maybe the newest member of the organization. Ryan Plunkett is joining us. Last week, he was named as the Vice President of Baseball Solutions for the Miami Marlins. Steven and I are intrigued. We have so many darn questions. But Ryan, thank you for joining us tonight. How you doing a week in here?
Doing all right. No, thank you guys for having me on. Excited to get to talk.
Well, we want to chat baseball, but I want to start with, could you take me back to the interview process when you were the lead lifeguard back home for 3 summers, Ryan?
that is correct. You guys did some digging. But no, there's a man-made sandy bottom pool in my hometown. It's like a chlorinated pond. I grew up swimming there every summer. And as a kid, I always wanted to, I looked up to the lifeguards, wanted to be a lifeguard. So that was my first dream job. Baseball was my second dream job. So I've been very lucky to only have a couple of jobs in my life, and I liked both of them. But that interview process was probably not the most rigorous beyond the swimming.
First guy, Steven, we've chatted with, his dream job was to be a lifeguard.
How about that?
Second was working in Major League Baseball. I love this.
That's great priorities.
Yeah, I suppose. I always loved baseball. Loved playing baseball. But at the youngest age, I guess before thinking about MLB, I'd swim in the morning and play baseball at night. So
you saved any lives, Ryan? Did you have to jump in? Yeah. Did you ever have to provide a flotation device?
I did have to jump in occasionally. Can't say anyone was ever in terrible danger. I think they probably would have been fine without me. But did have to jump in the pool once in a while. So.
All right, Stephen, you can really press him now on the roles and responsibilities here if you'd like.
Yeah, way to start it off, Kyle. Ryan, I this is the typical first interview question, but tell us a little bit about you growing up, where you grew up, how you got into baseball. Just kind of give it to us all, and we'll bounce off of that.
For sure. Yeah. So I originally grew up in the Boston area, like a half hour, 45 minutes south of Boston in Abington, Massachusetts. It's like if you split Boston and Cape Cod in half, we're kind of like right in the middle. So grew up a really big Red Sox fan and a Red Sox household. I know baseball is typically kind of seen as like a father-son activity, and my dad would play catch with me in the yard. But love of baseball really came from my mom. She grew up a really big Red Sox fan. She nowadays doesn't hesitate to remind me that she suffered through a lot of Red Sox misery, and then I happened to be born like in the golden age for all of Boston sports. So I was growing up. I loved playing baseball, loved watching baseball. It was sort of like our rule in the house was like to watch the game with her. I had to finish my homework, and it ended up working out pretty well. That she forced me to do homework. I liked math quite a bit, and doing my math homework, in hindsight, probably helped me get a job in baseball. So kind of came full circle there, but loved playing, was a mediocre high school player at best. And kind of, I think a lot of us, like on the nerd side, like we wanted to understand why we weren't very good and tried to like dig into the numbers a little bit and learn. So growing up in high school, I stumbled across like Fangraphs, which, online blog for reading about baseball analytics and whatnot. And that was just kind of like a light bulb moment for me. So stopped playing, started looking into the math of baseball, and things just kind of spiraled from there. So grew up loving the game, big Red Sox fan, and, was eventually got lucky enough to get a job in the industry for sure.
Ryan, what are some of your earliest baseball memories? Obviously, that's a cathedral at Fenway. It's one of our favorite places to go. But, as a family, I know we've all gone with our mom and dad and like had those special moments growing up. Was it those early memories at Fenway that kind of captivated you and propelled you into this love for the game?
Yeah, Fenway's amazing. Still one of my favorite parks to visit. We actually got to go as a family this year. I worked for the Phillies in the past, and the Phillies played in Boston this year. So got tickets for my parents and the extended family, and we went together to watch it at Fenway. It was my first time going as a visitor, which was kind of cool and kind of different. But yeah, grew up going to a ton of games at Fenway. We were close enough that you could drive down to Pawtucket and see the Pawtucket Red Sox play. At the time, there was their AAA affiliate. And there was also the Brockton Rocks of the Can-Am League played like pretty much down the street from us. So got to see some like decent summer ball games there as well. Those were some of the big ones. And the Cape Cod League was fairly close to us as well. My grandparents had a house in West Dennis. So we would go to a lot of the YD Red Sox games, Yarmouth Dennis in the Cape League. went to a lot of those summer camps. So loved watching baseball, loved playing baseball. A lot of the parks in the town where we lived were right around the corner from me. So we'd, walk to the Little League games together. And I don't really know what about baseball in particular drew me in. I love all sports, still support all Boston sports beyond baseball, which I know makes me pretty unpopular in most parts of the country. But baseball in particular was always kind of my favorite. And yeah, Fenway is unbelievable. I was fortunate enough to be, born in a history that had such a rich sports history, born in a town like that. So it was pretty cool. I don't know like what specifically drew me in, but yeah, something about the place, the stadium, the team, definitely just kind of like hooked me from a young age.
So you were in high school and you start to kind of play around with numbers. It's funny you mentioned Fangraphs. Kyle and I use the same thing just for broadcast purposes. But, Ryan, it was sort of taboo, the whole analytics thing. And I know you're young, I'm young, but it was still kind of like in its early stages. So what sort of direction did you think that you could get into? I mean, it was really, if you want to get into baseball, you want to be a GM, you want to be, a coach or whatever it may be. Maybe those analytical jobs weren't there at the time. So what did you always think it was, though, with numbers and analytics? What did you think your sort of path was into baseball as a job?
Yeah, I always hoped so that there would eventually be a job in the analytics sphere. But yeah, like you said, was just kind of like burgeoning, just starting out, and didn't have a ton of popularity. I read Fangraphs, I read Moneyball, I watched the movie Moneyball, and those were all kind of like light bulb moments for me. Like this, could it actually be a living? Maybe. I always say like I'm super, super lucky and super blessed that like my hobby ended up becoming my job, which is cool. I mean, relatedly, it kind of means you need to find a new hobby. So I'll definitely take that trade off. But I grew up, I wanted to, finish my homework so I could read on Fangraphs. And now Fangraphs has kind of become, my job to some extent, which is unbelievable opportunity and so much fun. But yeah, I enjoy watching baseball. I definitely wouldn't consider myself a scout. I'm definitely not a coach. I was a bad player. I'd be a worse coach. So I had a feeling if there was going to be a path in, it would be through the numbers. And was fortunate enough to latch on with the Phillies, and they kind of forgot to kick me out at the end. I stuck around there for a while, but yeah, I was hopeful there'd be some path as an analyst or something like that, but realized, a lot of luck along the way too.
Ryan, Steven's going to hate me for asking this. Do you think Moneyball was romanticized at all? The movie itself.
Easy.
For sure. I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. They had a pretty good pitching
Brad
staff.
Pitt
right?
was
That's
so good in
locked
it,
up.
though, right, Ryan? I mean, Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, it was a great combo, 1-2 punch.
No, yes, great movie. I'm maybe not the cinematic masterpiece that we all remember it as. And I'm not sure the story itself is like as underdog as they often like make it seem. But no, great movie. Not sure it's like an all-time classic, but in terms of explaining to people what I wanted to do when I grew up or stuff like that, it is very helpful as like a cultural touchstone, if you will.
I was going to ask you that because I joke about that, and it's a hot topic amongst the baseball community. But how much did the movie inspire you and kind of drive your aspirations at like, oh, there was a guy like kind of like me. I didn't play more than high school, and I can't coach, I can't manage, but I like numbers. How aspirational and inspirational was that for you?
Yeah, I think it was cool to see that it could be done. Yeah, like I was always, gonna, I think, believe in myself and be confident that I can do it. But of course, like seeing someone else like chart that path for you and do something like that, gives you some hope that, maybe you could be next. So I certainly don't have the looks of Brad Pitt, but was optimistic that could have, some of the brains of Jonah Hill and try to do something like that along the way. So it was inspirational in some sense, and yeah, cool story. Just knowing that jobs like that exist, and there are people out there that are like just as weird as us, right? Like Fangraphs was cool and like reinforced that there's like actually a community of people that like want to read about baseball and think about baseball super analytically and quantitatively, and you have plenty of friends at school that are really big baseball fans, but like the level of conversation or like the topics you want to discuss with them are are just different, and knowing there's a community of people out there that think similarly, that, are interested in the same kind of things as you is kind of empowering, kind of inspiring for sure.
So Ryan, we actually do have a couple things in common. The first one being that I went to the Harvard of New Jersey, Kean University, and you actually went to Harvard. Why Harvard, and just how are you here today to like speak about it? And is it that hard? Like, just I've never talked to actually someone that went to Harvard.
I promise. We're not that different. No, school was amazing. I definitely never expected to have an opportunity like that. I grew up, like I said, in the Boston area. So as a kid, I was familiar with Harvard, and knew it was, a great school, like really old institution.
The best school ever, maybe.
He's
like, yeah, it's a pretty good school.
Famous alums, but it was never necessarily a goal of mine. I always took high school and school seriously. My parents always pushed me to do well in school, but geographically, I knew I wanted to stay on the East Coast. I wanted to be close to home. I'm an only child. My parents are important to me. I didn't want to move too far away, so wanted to stick relatively close to home. Wanted to do something that was reasonable for our family from a financial perspective as well. And although the sticker price at like schools like that in the Ivy League is always really eye popping, they do a lot to make things reasonable for you to attend and kind of like meet you where your needs are. So it was really close to home. It was a good school. It was the cheapest financial option for us among the schools that I'd applied to. And it was a cool opportunity. It was exciting to go there. Met so many people that were so smart in so many different ways. And they all, do way more impactful things than help with baseball. Meet like doctors, lawyers, people doing cancer research. It's crazy. And of course, I'm proud of my job, but it's not rocket science. I think it's a cool job, but we're not necessarily changing the world here. But no, it was an awesome experience. It was fun staying close to home. Still have a lot of friends in the Boston area because of that. And it was convenient for getting home for the holidays and everything like that too. So can't complain.
Ryan, this will be contentious for you. I grew up right outside of Cornell, and I had season tickets for hockey, and obviously it's a very big rivalry. How many Cornell Harvard hockey games did you attend during your time at Harvard?
Yeah, I would go to some of the hockey games. They did a decent amount of promos at the hockey games, the basketball games, the Bean Pod every year. Yeah. Harvard hockey playing at the Garden was a lot of fun. The football games at Harvard Stadium were cool. The game with Harvard Yale. It was always fun at the end of the year. So it obviously can't compete with some of the other like college sports rivalries, college sports experiences. But in terms of going to games and like the athletic experience, had a lot of fun going to those ones. I guess on my like freshman housing application, I wrote that I liked baseball a lot. So it was like a semi-random rooming. Like you didn't get to pick your roommates. They tried to match people up that had similar interests, but I actually got placed in a 3-person room. 2 of the guys were varsity baseball players, and then it was me. So I got to go to some of their baseball games as well and got to know the team a little bit through them, which was fun. But yeah, Harvard athletics, there's decent culture there, and the hockey games for sure were always a pretty good time.
Let me ask you this, and we can really move forward here into your new role here, because
I got one more Harvard question when you're done.
I do as well. I was just wondering, Ryan, and I'm sure you've spoken on panels before. There's no singular way to get into this industry, obviously, and there's many different roles and things you can do. What was your area of study? Did you go to Harvard with the intention of working in baseball, or what were you studying in to try to help you get to this, or did this all kind of just fall into your lap?
Yeah, I think I definitely caught a few breaks along the way, but I did, in some sense, I viewed school as like a vehicle to like help propel me to the career that I wanted to have. So I alluded to reading Fangraphs, in middle school and high school, and a lot of teams post jobs on Fangraphs, and in the job descriptions you can read about the qualifications and the things they're looking for when they hire. So I'd always, in high school, I knew I wasn't qualified for these jobs, and like I said, I really wanted to be a lifeguard. So I wasn't looking at them that seriously, but I could tell that teams were looking to hire folks that had studied math or applied math. They'd knew how to program. They'd study statistics and things of that nature, studied physics. So I liked numbers. I liked math in high school. I took a statistics class my freshman year at college and I liked that. I knew teams were looking for that. And over time, I declared I was going to study statistics, and a lot of the statistics classes or computer science classes would count towards that major as well. And I realized, I could get a double major in statistics and computer science without adding too much to my course load. So I studied both of those. I'd never taken either of those classes in high school. I just knew I liked math and liked numbers. Decided, a lot of teams are hiring people that had those majors. At least they were saying that on Fangraphs. I tried a couple of those classes and I liked them. So decided to pursue those. And I liked the courses, the topics, like statistics, computer science on its own is fairly interesting to me. That being said, I'm not sure how much fun I'd have every day. A lot of people that study those things like go, crunch numbers for like Wall Street or, do different kinds of analysis. And I think you could do that. Like there are jobs in, studying like drug trials and doing things in biology or finance, like I said. But I'm not sure how much the material appeals to me beyond getting to apply it to baseball. Like that's what really fires me up and makes me the most passionate. So studied those two fields, statistics, computer science, largely because I wanted to get into baseball and thought they would help. But in a vacuum, I also had, thought the classes were interesting by themselves too.
And Ryan, to end your Harvard career here, you did write a senior paper, and when I was researching, not stalking your LinkedIn, what did you write your senior paper on, and what did you get as a grade?
So to answer the second one, they let me graduate, so I think that means I passed.
That was a humble way of saying a 100, Steven.
Yeah, I know. He's so humble.
So they don't. I'm not sure they actually give letter grades for your thesis, but some students, you don't necessarily have to write a thesis. In order to do a double major, you do. You have to like find some project that like combines the two fields of study, and you have to write a paper about that. So to study statistics and computer science, I had to write a paper about a topic. So unsurprisingly, we've talked a lot about how I like baseball and like numbers. So my senior thesis, I wrote about trying to predict the next pitch type that would be thrown. So based on like a pitcher's repertoire, his like past pitches thrown, the batter he's facing, some of their strengths and weaknesses, can we try to use like different statistical techniques to predict like whether a fastball, a breaking ball, an off-speed pitch will be thrown. And the results were honestly pretty underwhelming. It's kind of a surprise they said the paper passed because you couldn't do much better than like a coin flip or just predicting the pitcher's like most common offering, which on one hand was a bit surprising. I thought there'd be like some sort of signal there that you could pull out. On the other hand, like at this point, I'm sure if there were, abilities to do that, like teams would have found them and tried to correct for them to some extent. And so it ended up being like much to do about nothing. I like wrote a whole paper about not really finding anything, which was kind of a bummer. not the funnest conclusion. Would have been a lot more exciting if we'd actually found something worth writing home about. But like I said, they did let me pass, so I think all's well that ends well.
I love that the VP of Baseball Solutions senior paper was on that. That's always a good sign. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was just going to say future lifeguard and Marlins VP of Baseball Solutions, Ryan Plunkett, joining us here on the Hot Stove Show. Hey, look, let's get into a little bit of what you're doing now. I'm not sure how to ask this, Ryan, because I would venture to say you know more about the game than I ever will. But in order to be in your shoes, how much do you have to know about the game? Do you need to know every intricacy to hitting and running to pitches to outfield and sprint speed and all this stuff to then dive into numbers? Or are there parts of the game that people would be surprised that you don't really know much about, but that's not where you're supposed to be diving into, I guess, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think as like front offices grow and expand, roles become like a bit more specialized. So I'm definitely not an expert in anything. Wouldn't claim to be an expert in everything by any stretch of the imagination. And I think my role, at least historically with the Phillies, and my role here and my experience thus far, is going to be much more focused on the data side rather than like the operational transactional side. Like I'm familiar with free agency, familiar with option status, familiar with rosters and whatnot. But if you want to get into the intricacies of contracts and minor league free agents and whatnot, I would say that's not necessarily my my area of expertise, and I don't think it's supposed to be. There are plenty of folks on staff here that are much more qualified, much more talented than me in those areas, and would obviously to defer to them. When it comes to data and numbers, I think I'm relatively fluent across like most spheres of baseball when it comes to pitching analytics, hitting analytics, defensive analytics, sprint speed, things of that nature. I'd say historically, most of my research is focused on hitting and pitching. I think those are the areas where we have the most data. And so naturally, those are the areas we kind of gravitate towards to do research. So I'm going to be most comfortable talking about those. That being said, there's plenty of modeling work to be done when it comes to catcher defense and framing, when it comes to hit probability and out probability, and using those to evaluate infielders and outfielders, and then base runners when it comes to stolen base probability and break-even rates and whatnot. So feel relatively comfortable talking across all those areas and like on-field data, numbers, things of that nature. Feel relatively good when it comes to transactional and compliance and rules. That I'm comfortable with those probably more so than the average fan or even the most tuned-in fans, but definitely not the foremost expert in the office. And I mean, I don't think they're expecting me to be. I hope I'm not supposed to be that guy. But yeah, I'd say as the office grows and roles continue to expand and develop, I think people are becoming a bit more like specialized, like in their lanes, rather than being generalists that have to know everything about everything.
Ryan, I hope this isn't a lazy question, but I'm just really curious to know, and you can use Kyle and I as like players, but what is something you would look at if I'm like a shortstop or I'm a fielder? Like, what are some of the things that you are looking at? And then are you sort of the middleman of then telling the coaches like, hey, we feel like this guy can get better on his release, on his, his first jump? Like, I guess I'm asking for an example of some of the things that you're looking at on the field or in the box or whatever it may be that you're collecting and observing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the game has trended a bit more towards like breaking performance down into like latent skills or like underlying talent. So rather than looking at like a player's, OPS or his WRC plus or whatever metric you want to use, we're trying to look at like the individual components that sort of like sum up to those things. So for hitters, we can obviously look at their box score stats and whatnot and how they performed, but sure. When talking about like offensive performance, it seems like you can generally break things down into like, does this hitter swing at the right pitches? When he swings at the right pitches, does he make contact? When he makes contact, does he hit the ball hard? And when he hits the ball hard, does he hit the ball in the air? If he can answer yes to all four of those questions, like he's probably a pretty good player. And even if he can only say yes to 2 or 3 of those, he's probably a decent player. And so I think a lot of this role and a lot of analysis in general is trying to, develop those questions, figure out which are the right questions to ask, and then how can we use data, how can we use models to like answer those best, and can we get 1% better at answering those questions in each area. And then to develop those questions, to devise them, it's a lot of talking with coaches. So what makes a hitter good, what makes a pitcher good, then like coming up with a baseline model or trying to a first pass at a solution and ask guys like, what, does this pass the sniff test? Who are we too high on? Who are we too low on? And then over time, like trying to track players' performance in those areas. We think player X, he hits the ball really hard, but he hits it on the ground too frequently. From a coaching perspective, I don't know how to make the intervention to get him to change that. I think he'd be a better player if he could change that. So you kind of bring it to the coach's attention and say, do you think this is feasible? Give you the latitude to implement that however you want and make the changes you see fit. And then can we track that over time? Be like, hey, with player X, we talked with him 2 weeks ago. We tried to make a change. Can we look at his performance before that date and after that date? Do we see any changes? As him, now he's hitting the ball in the air more, but he's whiffing more frequently, kind of like the consistent cat and mouse game. Things are always, you fix one area and then a leak starts in the other, and we're just trying to plug holes and move things around. And so it's definitely not my role to speak with players. I have no playing experience, like I said, beyond bad high school player, and no coaching experience. But I think the idea is to, be comfortable enough with the data to talk with some of our analysts in the office, and then translate some of that to our coaches that can then bring it to players and decide how they want to intervene and actually make the changes we're recommending, or if those changes are feasible. So, yeah, I don't don't get in the weeds with players. Don't think that's my space. But try to, work with coaches to ask and answer questions that, help us, better understand the game and better understand players.
Forgive me if you heard me typing when you were talking, but I was listening to so much, Ryan, and I was writing down some questions I would like to ask you as I hear you talk. My first would be as you dive into a player, take player X. Is the first place you go FanGraphs just to get an overarching view of the individual, or do you immediately dive into software and information that I could not obtain by going to MLB.com, Baseball Reference, or FanGraphs?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. We do have some, proprietary metrics that we'll look at and that we feel good about. That being said, the questions that I just, alluded to and kind of described, like, I think you get a decent feel for a lot of those by pulling up FanGraphs or Baseball Savant. So, like, what is, does a player swing at the right pitches? If you want to look at his, like, in-zone swing rates or his chase rates, like, you can find those publicly. If you want to, break that down a bit further and, like, model players like hot zones or his cold zones, like how much damage is he going to do when he swings? We have some internal metrics that I think, do a better job capturing that and layering on, like, individual, like, zone preferences and player skills that may be more difficult to access from public sites. But I think you can get a decent approximation of some of these metrics by looking at what's available publicly. Same thing, like, does a player, when he swings, does he make contact? That, you can answer with in-zone contact rates or just overall swing and miss rates. That being said, you might want to, like, control for pitch quality. We want to penalize a player more for swinging and missing at the 92-mile-an-hour fastball than a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, just because, like, the baseline expectations for those pitches are probably a bit different. And so I think it's harder to get, like, that level of granularity in the public sphere. But I think if you, want to devise your own framework for evaluating a hitter, or you can do the same thing on the pitching side, you can get, like, okay approximations for a lot of things that teams are looking at least from, like, the performance data side, just using publicly available data for sure.
Well, Ryan, that was amazing, and I can't believe we're 27 minutes in, and we really appreciate all the time you're giving us. So you were with the Phillies for 7 years, is that correct?
Yeah, it depends how you count my intern years. I started interning in 2017 and 18,
Okay.
and I started full-time in 19. So if you count those intern seasons, it was 8 seasons with the club, which was a lot of fun. Will always be a special place, special people for me. But no, excited to get going here as well.
And that was your first job out of Harvard, correct?
Yes, so I graduated from school in 2019, and then that was, like, late May, early June, and then I think by the start of July, I had found a place to live in Philly and moved in and started full time there.
So you're there for 7 years, and, Peter Bendix and you have a conversation, or you go through your interview process. Just walk us through what about his vision was, or what he said that made you leave, obviously a really good situation in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, I love Philly. Like I said, special place, special people. And I'll always have a soft spot for it. Like you said, they kind of gave me an opportunity coming out of school and took a chance on me in many ways. So love the place and owe a ton to them, but was excited by the opportunity to come down here and build something together. And talking with Peter and his vision, was really excited how he saw the game, how he saw this role, how he saw me fitting in, and a lot of the people that he's already brought in. I'm super excited to work with the staff. I think the front office is really talented. I think the coaching staff that they've brought in is really talented. And, looking at the office directory compared to other clubs, I think it's, maybe smaller in nature, but the talent density, if you will, the skills that they've brought in relative to the number of people is really, really high. So I think the group he's assembling here is super impressive. I'm excited to work with our farm director, our scouting director, excited to work with our coaching staff in the big leagues and the minor leagues, and excited to work with all those people in Philly as well. I love what I did there, no ill will whatsoever, but the opportunity to build something together and apply some of what I've learned in Philadelphia and try to bring that here was really appealing. I don't want to replicate that by any stretch. I think there's some things they do well, some things they do less well. I have some opinions. Other folks that Peter's brought in, I'm sure, have their own opinions. And, don't want to do Philadelphia 2.0. I want to do Miami 1.0 and do it really, really well. So I think the vision, the group he's, like, assembling is super exciting. and it's going to be fun to be a part of. So it's scary to leave. I won't lie. Philadelphia was awesome, and I will miss it quite a bit. But I'm also pretty fired up by this opportunity and looking forward to really hitting the ground running.
Ryan, the job to me seems very big league driven. How much involvement do you have in the minor leagues and number crunching down there on the farm?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. We'll be able to touch like every arm of the organization. Some of the models that we work on, I think will scale fairly well. Like if we talk about a pitch quality model, that's dependent on how fast the pitcher throws, where he locates, how much the ball moves. We're really fortunate that unless you're playing on the moon, that more or less like scales everywhere, right?
Okay.
Where like a strikeout rate or a walk rate, an ERA, those are things that are somewhat dependent on the ballpark that you play in, or like the defense you're playing in front of, the lineup that you're going against. But if my fastball is thrown this hard with this much movement in this location, we could be playing in Miami, we can play in Jacksonville, we can play in Beloit, we can look at college players, and like those physical properties of a pitch, they kind of they exist in a vacuum anywhere. And so I think a lot of the work will be collaborating with the big league coaching staff and whatnot to bring our insights to the field in Miami. But we can also use those models to evaluate our minor league players and see, are our pitchers getting better? When we promote a player, his performance status is probably going to get a little worse just because he's facing better competition and the game gets harder. But we can look at his pitch quality and say, he's just getting unlucky or he's facing better players. So you don't really need to hit the panic button. Like we know it's all the same stuff. He's just leveling up. It's going to take a minute. Or when looking at college players, we can look and say, his pitch quality is great. He just plays in a stadium that's, like 290 feet down the line. He's going to give up a lot of home runs. It is what it is. When he plays in, a more representative ballpark, things are going to level out. And so I think the idea is, the closer we get to those players, like underlying skill level, try to strip out like some of the quality of competition and some of that context, just figure out how good is this player. We can then apply those models across like all levels of baseball, whether it's pro, amateur, international, and try to like use those insights everywhere, not just the big leagues. So I think there will be a heavy emphasis on MLB, but the goal would be to build things that scale down even farther as far as we can go.
Interesting. Go ahead, Steven. You want to ask one? I've got plenty,
No,
but seriously, go right ahead.
When Ryan was just talking about just some of those underlying numbers, I mean, whenever I think underlying numbers that were a little bit misleading, I just think of an individual in Jonah Bride, the Marlins acquired from Oakland, and a guy that didn't have a ton of playing time there. But what we were told was he's an analytical darling, and you gave him a full year of playing, and you saw what kind of year he had. So it's just really interesting to see just kind of the strategy behind behind the scenes on some of this. But Ryan, I wanted to just quickly ask you, because I just tried to bridge the gap with you and Gabe Kapler. I know he managed in Philadelphia. Did you have any overlap there?
Yeah, I was there his last full-time season in Philly, and then one of my intern years he was there as well. So we didn't work too much together on the day-to-day. That is crazy story. I've now met Gabe a few times. The first time I was 7 years old. And so, like I said, I grew up in the Boston area, was a really big Red Sox fan as a kid. He was on the 2004 team that broke the curse. And Gabe Kapler and Kevin Millar were signing autographs at a mall near us. And so me, my mom, and one of my mom's sisters waited in line at the mall for Gabe Kapler and Kevin Millar's autograph. And I have a photo of 7-year-old me with Gabe at the mall, which we'd forgotten about. But my mom and aunts loved Gabe Kapler. They thought he was pretty cute. So that photo, I think, was more memorable for them than it was for me. But so then I get hired by the Phillies as an intern. Gabe gets hired as the manager, and they bring that up. So I actually, at the end of my internship, I printed out that photo and asked if he'd sign it.
Oh my gosh.
Brought it home in like 2018 or 2019, and they gave a copy to my mom. And she thought that was funny, like put it somewhere in the house, like on the kitchen table, on the countertop. And again, kind of forgot about it for a while. And then the Marlins, this process started. I happened to interview with Gabe Kapler again. And so got to tell him, he remembered meeting me in Philly. He did not remember that we'd met when I was 7 years old. But kind of like a weird full circle, history keeps repeating itself here. So once again, now not only do I have a photo with Gabe Kapler that's signed by Gabe, I actually, am coworkers with him once again.
Unbelievable.
So.
Your office is right next door.
Yeah, so I don't, didn't ask him for an autograph during the interview. So hopefully that went over okay. But no, it's did overlap with him in Philly, and kind of a weird full circle story there.
Right. This is more probably the nuts and bolts of it, but it's interesting to me. I almost view in my mind your job is like it's like two different jobs. There's like the off season job and then the in season stuff. And I'll ask you about the in season stuff in a moment. The structure of the department as an executive, you have multiple people underneath you. I'm sure you guys continue to look to build that out, and you'll have a whole crew of folks underneath you. But if I'm Peter Bendix and I say we're thinking and we're very interested in player X, when he says, Ryan, what do you have on player X? Can you explain to me the hierarchy and the structure of your department? Do you immediately start divvying up certain responsibilities of player X to people underneath you? Or like when a player gets put on a notepad in front of you, where do you start and how do you delegate work here?
Yeah, I think like ideally we talked a lot about breaking players down into these individual components. And I think that is, optimal for like evaluating a player and like analyzing him and developing him, is like finding out like where is he good, where is he bad, where does he struggle, where can we intervene. That being said, it's not really helpful to have a ton of, different numbers. We think he's really good in these 3 areas and really poor in these 3 areas. It's like, well, just, how good is he, period. So I think the goal is to, break him down into a bunch of different components and then almost like build him back up. Different components are probably worth different amounts. Just because he's really above average in one area and really below average in one area doesn't necessarily mean it cancels out to 0. So I think we try to like have those component models and then build additional models that kind of like build the player back up. And then, we need to translate that into units we can measure and quantify. It's one thing to say a player like has really good bat speed. Okay, cool. That's helpful. That's useful. It's good for tracking. But like, how many runs is bat speed worth? How many wins is that worth? How many dollars is that worth? And I think about all those steps and conversions is sort of like an assembly line where we like break the player down and then, build him back up into these different components that we need to, weigh each of those components and then translate it into runs, wins, dollars, whatever our currency that we're using is. And so I think right now, still, onboarding and figuring out what we currently have access to, what we need to, tweak and get better at, and where we think we're okay. And so ideally, I think about like assembly line, we're probably going to have sub-departments, individual analysts, individual groups kind of like own each step of that process, where like the outputs of one model, the outputs of one analyst's work almost become the inputs to the next person's work, and just kind of like pass the baton down the line until we get to a number that we feel good about. And like evaluating the player, we project he's going to be this good, which is worth this much, and this is what we're willing to offer him as a free agent or in trade. This is how good we think we are, where our holes are, and how we're going to try to address them. So I think still to get my feet under me here and figuring it out. But when we think about like the vision for the department or how we're going to go about breaking down players, I like to think of it in that like assembly line. Each person owns like one step in the process.
Ryan, I have 2 more, Stephen, and I know you're in Dallas, Ryan. I should have started that by saying you're at the winter meetings with all of your new colleagues. I have 2 more, Stephen. I want to be very respectful of your time, Ryan. Do you have more, Stephen?
I just have one more left, and yes,
fire away. Yeah, I'll ask mine real quick.
Good. No rush.
You want to go first, Kyle? Or you want me to go?
Go ahead. No, feel free. Go right ahead.
When we talked with Peter, I think it was last week, when he started talking about the hiring of you, I had to write this down. He said, quote, the intellectual curiosity that he showed, the leadership traits, even though he's pretty young in his career, and the culture fit that he is, he's going to enhance our culture and make the people around him better, close quote. And I know people like you who are so humble and so intellectual, beyond my realm of possibility. You like to be humble, but I need you to try to be a little bit, I don't want to say cocky, but I'd love for you to share just the cultural fit. Why do you think Peter had said that? We know about the brains, we know about the solutions, but what about the culture, you as a person, that you feel you're going to benefit the organization?
Well, thank you for all that, and thank you to Peter for saying that. No, that quote was tremendous. My mom was really, really happy to read that. I was really happy to read that. So
Got to keep mom away from, by the way, from Gabe. Now that you're in close proximity, you got to make sure you have to lock her out.
You said it. Yeah, she gets no tickets this year. But no, thank you for saying all that. And yeah, it's big shoes to fill. It's a tough quote to live up to, but excited about the opportunity and the challenge. I think one of the things I'm proudest about in Philly was just connecting with a variety of groups and stakeholders, and people that didn't always have the same background as me. Like I said, don't have much of a playing background beyond high school, don't have a scouting background, don't have a coaching background, but ended up being placed in situations where I had to engage with a lot of those folks. One of the things I often allude to that was really important for my career and helps me a lot. It's terrible to say it, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and I hope we don't have to go through it again, but would be the pandemic. A lot of our coaches, a lot of the industry had never, had to use like Zoom calls before, and now Zooms are commonplace. We're talking on a Zoom equivalent right now, but had to help a lot of our coaches get onboarded with Zoom in 2020. And that terrified me. Like I had nothing in common. What am I going to talk about with a coach? I'm, in my early 20s, I went to an Ivy League school. I never played, and I'm just stuck on the phone with a coach that's older, that got drafted out of high school, that's been in pro ball for 30 years. It's just like, what do we have in common? I'm an introvert. I'm not a conversationalist. Like, how is this going to go? Like, we're just stuck on hold. Like, I'm an IT professional. We just got to make conversational someone's computer reboots. And just like learn to talk with someone, right? And like, it sounds silly in hindsight, but that was big for me. Just like, what makes people tick? How do you like interact and engage with baseball folks? And you find out you have more in common than you think. I got really good advice from one of my friends in Philadelphia. Like, when you're not sure what to talk about with someone in baseball, like ask them about their players and ask them about their family, and people just tend to light up, and you can usually find something in common there. So, scouts and coaches are always on the road and they never see their families. So you ask them and they just want to talk about their kids and talk about their wives and talk about their families. And then you want to talk about players, who do you like, who do you dislike, what are you working on, and just like let them talk and bring the conversation to you. So I try to use that approach with coaches and with scouts. And again, I don't have that experience and can't relate to them in that way, but we're all chasing the same thing, right? Like we want to be happy in life, and we want to find good players, and we want to help our teams win. And so, at the time, I didn't feel like I had a ton in common with them. I still don't feel like I have a ton in common with them, but I was hopefully able to meet in the middle, establish some, like universal common ground to stand on. And I'm proud of that. It was really scary. I still feel a little uncomfortable, and everyone feels like an imposter at times, working with pro athletes, former pro players, former big leaguers, but try to bring that and try to fit into the culture and add to the culture and see what we can do.
Introverted and not being a conversationalist is music to my ears, Ryan. I'd love to be friends with you. I could sit in a room and not talk to somebody for hours. And
I've tried to go out with Kyle for 3 months now to watch some football games. He keeps telling me he's busy.
Yeah, bowl season. Football season's almost over. All right, I got 2 more for you, Ryan, because I know you got a lot to do out there in Dallas.
Go for it.
If during the season, Peter's obviously not privy to everything you're doing as a department every day. He's got a ton of roles and responsibilities. There's going to be a lot of work that you're doing in stuff that you're uncovering that maybe the others don't know about. If you uncover something, let's say Stephen brought up Jonah Bride's name. Let's say he's a big part of the team this year. And through your research and all your digging and you and your crew, you find something. Where does your research go when you're convicted enough that what you want to tell somebody could help that player with so much on the line? Does it go to an assistant GM who then funnels it to the clubhouse? I'm really talking nuts and bolts. How do you disseminate your information once you're convicted that you have something that you really think could help?
Yeah, I think like once we do our research and feel good about it, then we want to document everything we work on. We want to like share that with our department. We want to review it, make sure everyone feels good about it, from the analysts that worked on it to their peers to department leadership to me and whatnot. And then when we feel good about it, I think we want to bring it and surface it, whether it's to the AGMs, to other VPs, to Peter himself, and get them comfortable. And the big thing for me is, I think, getting the analysts themselves, the people that did the work, let them get comfortable presenting it and get them some face time. I think the folks that actually do the work deserve the opportunity to grow and learn from that and present their work. And I think in large part, I have this opportunity because my supervisors in Philly gave me those chances. So I think it's kind of my goal to be the middleman and manage in some sense, but definitely don't want to like take the credit from my group or use that opportunity just myself. So I think my role is to like vet our findings and determine what we think is worthwhile to bring. And then, I think we want to document everything. We want to have internal write-ups, and we want to surface that to the group. And we also just want to have like automatic processes in place. So when we improve a model, and again, like we get better at, estimating like one of those steps in the process, then it just kind of like flows into the assembly line, like I said, and those like final numbers that get spit out into like our internal platform and like player evaluation systems. But we can just trust them. And all of a sudden that player's like value is going to increase, and we want to be able to explain why. If folks ask, interpretability is a big thing for us. But ideally, I think we want to establish, automated processes and enough credibility that as we get like incrementally better at these things, we don't necessarily have to like call a meeting to discuss it or like necessarily, flag things explicitly. We just kind of want all the steps in the pipeline to like update and get the latest and best values in front of folks, and then let them use that, like make decisions as quickly as possible, and hopefully they feel comfortable with those changes.
Fascinating. My last one for you. We love baseball, but do you have a hard time watching the game as a fan now? When now that you work for the Marlins, and I don't know, answer this too. I don't know how much you'll be traveling and how much we'll see you during the year, but if you're up in the GM suite and Sandy's pitching and he looks great, but he's been missing outside all night long, does that make you want to grab your computer and find out why immediately? Or is it post game, or do you just, once the ball is thrown at 6:40, you just watch the game as a fan?
Yeah, it's tough. I do. I still love watching baseball. I still love baseball. That being said, I do think I watch it differently. I think I mentioned this earlier in the call that I feel super lucky and super blessed that my hobby became my job. That being said, like I feel like I need a new hobby at times, and it's like, I don't want to say you like burn yourself out, but to your point, like when I'm watching baseball, I think I'm thinking more analytically, thinking more critically than I did probably 10, 15 years ago when you just watch a game for fun. So in one way, I've become a bigger basketball fan as a result of that. Now I think I can watch the NBA a little more casually, and that's like my sports outlet. Like my competitive juices still get flowing, but I'm not thinking as critically. Where to your points, like as a game is ongoing, like I'll love to pull up some of the data feeds and just have a feel for how guys look, what's different today, is there any changes, things that we should be aware of. So I think I do like struggle to turn off the like analyst brain, if you will. That being said, like still enjoy watching baseball and have a lot of fun with that, especially when the crowd is getting into it. It's high leverage moments and things of that nature. There's a lot of stuff that like, we still can't prove. A lot of data suggests that like the clutch factor isn't real, but like you watch enough games and see enough, high leverage moments, so it doesn't like, you still feel like your heart rate speed up. And you're like, if I were in this situation, I don't know how well I'd perform. And so it does make you question, and like, is there a human element that like we can't measure? And so I think, yes, it's forced me to watch other sports to like be more of a casual fan. That being said, I still try to keep some of the casual fandom in me when I watch baseball, because I do think that's what makes it fun. The unpredictability, the excitement, and those leverage moments. You can't really beat it.
Well, this has been incredible. Folks, that was aspiring lifeguard and as a hobby, the vice president of baseball solutions for the Miami Marlins, Ryan Plunkett. Ryan, enjoy the rest of your time in Dallas. So much. It really was. It's been so great to meet you, and I hope Steven and I can just catch up with you soon, whether it's at the ballpark or up in Jupiter. Would love to learn more about what you do. It's incredible work. So thank you again for joining us on the Hot Stove Show.
Of course. No, this was awesome. Thank you guys for having me. I had a great time.